Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a totally mind-blowing journey. We are going to trace exactly how humanity's relationship with bees evolved from basically destructive harvesting to this massive, sustainable, industrial management system. And the incredible part? This entire evolution was driven completely by our expanding biological understanding of the hive. Specifically, unlocking the true role of the queen and realizing that we aren't just dealing with a bunch of individual insects, we're actually interacting with a single, living superorganism.
So let's start with a really fascinating puzzle, one that captures the ultimate historical and biological mystery of keeping these amazing insects. How on earth do you domesticate a creature that literally has 50,000 minds? Well, as you'll see, the secret was never about taming the individual bee. It was entirely about understanding the ancient 50-million-year-old structure of the colony itself.
Okay, part 1. The early honey hunters. Let's jump right into the ancient origins of our relationship with bees, which kicked off with a pretty rugged practice we call honey hunting.
For literally thousands of years, humans and bees were stuck in a rough kind of stasis. If you wanted sweetness in your diet back then, you had to track wild bees down. There are actually cave paintings in Spain from 9,000 years ago showing humans scaling cliffs just to rip honey from wild combs. Over time, sure, we started building some rudimentary housing for them. Around 4,500 years ago, the Egyptians were using these pottery tubes along the Nile, and by the Middle Ages in Europe, folks used woven straw baskets called skeps. But here's the massive flaw of this whole era. Because people didn't understand how the hive actually functioned, getting the honey out almost always meant destroying the comb and killing the entire colony, usually by smoking them out with sulfur. It was essentially search and destroy.
Moving on to part 2, discovering the queen bee. As you're about to see, early societies struggled with beekeeping simply because they completely misunderstood the true dynamics of the hive. For centuries, even absolute geniuses like William Shakespeare got this completely wrong. People basically projected their own human societal structures straight onto the bees. They just assumed the hive was a patriarchal kingdom ruled by a king bee who passed judgment and punished the lazy male drones. It's a very poetic idea for sure, but biologically, it was entirely backwards. But then, right in the 17th century, a massive paradigm shift hit. Careful observers like Luis Méndez de Torres in Spain and Charles Butler in England made this stunning realization. The head of the hive was actually female. The king was a queen. This completely overturned thousands of years of assumptions and forced humanity to rethink the whole shebang inside that buzzing box.
Part 3, the superorganism. Now, this biological revelation ended up posing a profound intellectual riddle, especially for evolutionary scientists trying to make sense of the natural world. Enter Charles Darwin. Picture this. Darwin is developing his grand theory of evolution, and the honeybee just stumps him. The dilemma was, how could infertile female workers successfully pass on their traits to the next generation if they never actually reproduce? Darwin's answer to this was a total breakthrough. He realized that natural selection applies to the family as a whole unit. You literally cannot look at a single bee as an individual. The entire hive functions as one single living superorganism.
And the division of labor within this superorganism is just incredibly precise. At the very top, you have exactly one queen responsible for all the reproduction. Then, you've got about 300 to 400 male drones. Their one and only job is mating, and biologically, they are wild examples of haploid looting. Meaning, get this, they actually have no father, only a grandfather. But the true engine, the real driving force of the superorganism, is the 50,000-plus female workers. These infernal females do absolutely everything else. They clean, they feed the young, they forage, they guard the hive. It is a perfectly balanced, completely female-driven machine. Which brings us to part 4, inventing the modern hive. Truly understanding this organism's biology is what finally unlocked our ability to work with it, rather than just continually destroying it for a quick taste of honey. Okay, it all came down to this incredibly precise magic number, 3/8 of an inch. Back in the 1850s, a congregational minister named Lorenzo Langstroth had a literal eureka moment. He was intensely studying how bees move and communicate on the comb, basically what they use as their dance floor and pantry. And he realized that if you leave exactly a 3/8-inch gap between wooden frames, the bees will just recognize it as a hallway. They won't glue the frames together with wax. This became known as bee space, and it was honestly like splitting the atom for beekeeping. It allowed a beekeeper to finally pull out a frame of honey, harvest it, and slide it right back in without harming the superorganism at all. That single discovery of bee space
sparked an absolute flurry of 19th century inventions that basically birthed the modern beekeeping industry. Alongside Langstroth's movable frames, you had Moses Quimby popularizing the bellows smoker. Because bees communicate primarily through smell, a few puffs of smoke safely mask the superorganism's alarm pheromones, which calms them right down. Then, in 1865, Franz Huschke invented the centrifugal extractor. This thing spun honey out of the combs kind of like a washing machine, which left the valuable wax totally intact. And finally, wax foundation extruders allowed beekeepers to give the bees a pre-stamped wax canvas to build on, saving the colony just an immense amount of time and energy.
Part 5. The modern pollination machine. All of these mechanical advances allowed beekeeping to transition from a quaint backyard hobby right into a massive, highly mobile pillar of global agriculture.
So here's the really crazy part. Our entire perspective on the bee's economic value has flipped upside down. Today's commercial beekeepers actually make very little money from selling honey itself. The whole U.S. honey economy is worth roughly $400 million. But the value of bee pollination to our agricultural system, that is a staggering $30 billion. To put that into perspective, the honey is just a drop in the bucket. Their true worth today is all about migratory pollination.
To sustain our modern diets, this superorganism essentially has to go on a massive annual road trip. Every single January, roughly 70% of all commercial bees in the United States are loaded onto semi-trucks. We're talking up to 500 hives at a time on one truck, and they're shipped all the way across the country. Their destination? California's Central Valley, where they are desperately needed to pollinate 900,000 acres of almonds. It is quite literally a massive, industrialized movement of nature.
But, as you might guess, creating this giant cross-country flu clinic of mixing bees from all over the place has introduced some severe threats to the superorganism. We've exposed them to a perfect storm of climate change, monoculture diets, pesticides, and parasitic mites. All of this culminated in the mid-2000s with the mysterious colony collapse disorder. Beekeepers often call it the Marie Celeste syndrome, named after that famous abandoned ghost ship, because the worker bees simply vanish. There are no dead bodies left around the hive. The colony just quietly empties out, leaving only the queen behind.
Which brings us to the ultimate reckoning of our modern era. As we wrap up our explainer today, we want to leave you with this critical question. We spent thousands of years figuring out how this 50-million-year-old superorganism operates, and we finally mastered how to manage it without destroying it. But what happens to our global food system if this incredibly fragile symbiotic balance finally collapses under the immense weight of our industrial management? It's definitely something we all need to chew on the next time we take a bite of our favorite foods. Thanks so much for learning with us today.